Welcome back, analysts. We did it. After a very long postseason, we are finally here at graduation day. We're here to see which of these mascots is going to win that coveted trophy, the ring to rule them all in tonight's Benito Bowl, the Bad Bunny Bowl of 2026. But as we go on, we still remember all the times we had together. We look back at those mascots that had us shrieking with fear and horror, those mascots that made unthinkably stupid decisions that cursed their team, and the new members that we added this year with their cuteness and lovability. We laughed, we cried, but overall, we had fun. And isn't that what it's all about? But we can't just have fun because we do have jobs to do. We have to get down to business and decide between the Seattle Seahawks and the New England Patriots which of these mascots is going to be crowned the winner of the 2025-2026 mascot matchup. So let's not waste any more time. Let's jump right in, and we're going to start with just reviewing these mascots, reminding ourselves of some of their accolades, some of the things that we learned about them earlier on. So let's start with Pat Patriot and the New England Patriots. So we'll put up his 3Cs, the initial thoughts, the right off the bats. And as we might remember, because he is meant to portray a man, felt kind of weird about the cuteness, but he's generally creepy. So even if I rated his cuteness, it would not be high. And so we have the cuteness already starting out poorly, the clarity, pretty clear what it is. And with Iris's version, throughout this season, we had my 6-year-old niece join us as a guest analyst and giving her thoughts on what these mascots looked like. This was one that I unfortunately was not able to get her opinion on, so that one we just can't know. And the creativity giving this a 0 out of 10. So we see, in general, really not too impressive in terms of the initial thoughts. I'll put the history and uniqueness together because these, for me, just kind of show that overall something's happening in the Patriots organization. Something shady, something weird. First off, with the history, if we remember that they lie about when this mascot got inducted, saying that he came on almost 35 years before he did to maybe make him look more impressive. I don't know. And they really make it a point to hide who the person is behind this mascot mask, which most other teams don't. And so what's going on? What's going on, New England, right? And this shouldn't surprise us based on the New England franchise that there's some weirdness, some things going. So it's apropos, it's par for the course, but I don't like it. And then we looked at their accolades, so a reminder that he is an 8-time Pro Bowler and has been to 10 of the team's 11 Super Bowls and frequently wins. I mean, Pat Patriot, if he's going to a Super Bowl, he's basically winning the Super Bowl. So that is incredibly impressive. This year, we added the new category of community engagement, and we see that Pat Patriot was incredibly engaged in his community on and off the field. We'll skip social media presence because Pat Patriot basically did too, that he doesn't really have any social media presence. And then going into the last of the miscellaneous is we see a level of toughness that if we remember, he was tackled by an NFL pro, a real NFL player with the New York Jets and was able to survive that hit. So off the bat, we do see some impressive things and, maybe a little bit of some concerning things. And so let's go into Blitz with the Seattle Seahawks and start with his initial thoughts and right off the bats. So you'll see the cuteness there that we have, clarity, pretty clear, even for Iris's version, very, very clear on this, and creativity as well. Love the creativity, talked a lot about the history behind it. So the initial thoughts, the right off the bats, are pretty impressive for Blitz. Then in terms of history, if we remember, he is not the lone mascot. This is an element with mascots that I just do not like when they have to share the spotlight with others. However, Blitz is still involved, but we got live Hawks. We got 2 other Hawk mascots. I mean, it's a lot, Blitz is center stage, I guess, but we have a lot of supporting characters here, which I just don't like for Blitz. But something that I did like came in the uniqueness in terms of Blitz being named an actual captain by their actual coach at the time, Pete Carroll, which is nuts. I don't think any other mascot has or will ever be given this honor. And then we see in accolades, multiple Pro Bowls, multiple Super Bowls as well. And then very recently this past year being inducted into the NFL Hall of Fame, the Mascot Hall of Fame. So really, really impressive in terms of these accolades. And then that impressivity, I don't know if that's a word, impressiveness, continues on with the community engagement where we see that he has won the 2 times, 2 years in a row, and very recently winning the Anchor in the Community Award, which is the Walter Payton Man of the Year equivalent for these players. And lastly, we see that he has a high social media presence with a pretty strong following compared to the other mascots. And there is a miscellaneous here, but I will talk about that later once we get into the video. Now, from here, what we want to do is look at the losses that these mascots have suffered and the teams, I guess, have suffered throughout the season. Their other mascot matchups, how did they do? Often looking at this can kind of point us to potentially any patterns, anything to be on the lookout for, anything to be wary of in terms of how these mascots might match up in this Super Bowl. And so to get to these stage, both these teams didn't have that many losses. Both of them actually only had three. And so we will start with the Patriots and Pat Patriot. So we had three losses, two of them coming in September, so very early in the season, but one of them coming all the way in mid-December, so pretty late in the season. Now, on September 7th, Pat Patriot lost to the Raiders and their mascot, which is called Raider Rusher, I think, or Rusher Raider. And there is almost just no excuse to lose to a mascot like this. It is incredibly disgraceful. The only grace that I'll give them is this was their very first game, so maybe shaking off the cobwebs. Maybe they came in a little bit too arrogant. I don't know. That's the only thing I can think of. But otherwise, this would be a gigantic concern. Moving on to the next game. Also came in September 21st. They lost to the Steelers by about 7 points. I don't know if I mentioned in the first one with the Raiders, they also lost by 7. Lost to the Steelers and Steely McBeam by 7 points. When we think of this matchup, we have a blue-collar steel worker with a American patriot. I mean, this is like the white man's true American off, right? And what we see is that at this point, Pat Patriot did not pull himself up by the bootstraps to win that matchup. And then going into our very last one, we had that came in December 14th. They lost to the Bills and Billy the Buffalo, by 4 points. And so when we look at these losses, aside from the Raider one, which is, again, unforgivable, pretty strong mascots in Steely McBeam and Billy the Buffalo. And so let's go on to Blitz and then let's talk about any patterns and potentially based on these losses, kind of our thoughts for this Super Bowl matchup. And so, like I said, Blitz also had, and the Seattle Seahawks had only 3 losses. The first also came in their first game. They lost by 4 points to the San Francisco 49ers and Sourdough Sam. And this one, again, would be concerning, but something that's surprising and that we need to remember in the divisional round is that Sourdough Sam actually beat Swoop, which I thought was insane. And so there is something that Sourdough has figured out about these bird mascots. Maybe he's just good at playing them. And so we can't fault Blitz too much for that. Let's go into the next game. So the next one, they lost to the Buccaneers by 3 points in October. And their mascot, I forget his name at the moment, but terrifying looking guy. And we think about this too. He's supposed to represent a pirate. We think of the history of pirates and birds. As we know, for a long time, the bird was basically the sidekick to the pirate. They had the parrots that would sit on their shoulder while they're kind of hanging out with their master, etc. And so in that case, it's not strange to me, and we wouldn't really expect that Blitz, being a bird, could beat, in essence, somebody's supposed to be kind of his sensei, his master, in terms of this pirate. And so I can't fault Blitz too much for that one either. And the last loss came in November. That was to Rampage. They lost by only 2 points. But the thing to note is that Blitz actually ended up being Rampage in 2 more games to actually get to the Super Bowl. So yes, he did lose this mascot, but beat him 2 other times in a row, right? And so again, I mean, the loss is not as much of a concern because of that. What is a concern to me is the fact that 2 out of the 3 losses that Blitz had came to mascots that are supposed to represent white men. Now, that could be a coincidence, but to me, that's kind of showing a concerning pattern. And yes, while I do think in this day and age, and honestly in the history of America in general, while I think it is wise and I dare to say even vital to have a healthy fear of white men, is this fear leading Blitz to inaction? That when he comes into this game, he is not able to surpass this fear and actually beat his competition. Now, as we know, this would be a huge concern because Pat Patriot is a white man, probably the white man in terms of being a patriot, right? And so this is a huge concern, but something that I did note as well from, if you remember from the losses that I talked about with Pat Patriot, he also lost two of his matches to white men. So I don't overly want to fault Blitz, but in this situation, Blitz is the one facing the white man, not Pat Patriot. And so that does put me at more a level of concern. And I will say throughout the three losses, he was improving. They lost by 4 points in the first, three in the second, two in the last. And Pat Patriot, his losses were bigger in terms of being at least a touchdown for most of them. But again, this is just a concerning pattern, something to look out for, something to really think about. And we don't just want to look at the losses or the matchups that they had during the season, but we also want to look at these mascots when they actually faced off against one another and thinking about on the biggest stages where they might have done this. And as we might remember, I actually cited this in one of my earlier videos during this year's mascot matchup that Blitz and Pat Patriot have faced each other before. Faced each other about 10 years ago. It was sometime in the 24 to 2016, something in there, Super Bowl, where they played them and Pat Patriot ultimately came out victorious. But I would dare to say that it wasn't really that Pat Patriot beat Blitz, but rather Blitz and especially his team lost that game. I mean, in the last moments, as we can all remember, Russell Wilson, for some unimaginable reason, when he's just, a few yards from the end zone, decides to throw the ball instead of handing it off to Marshawn Lynch to run it in, right? And that would seal their fate. And so something that's encouraging to me is that Blitz with Pat Patriot and with the great legend Tom Brady, who we know has won about 7 Super Bowl rings at this point, that he was able to hold his own for a good period of time until his own teammates lost that game for him. So although Pat Patriot won, this to me is not necessarily a knock towards Blitz. If anything, it might be a stronger point in his box, the fact that he could really, again, hold his own against such a strong team, a team that's used to going to Super Bowls and winning. Okay, so the last thing that we're going to consider before we just put together all the evidence and come to our final decision is that of music. If you watched my mascot matchup last year, the Super Bowl, I talked about really this power that it can have, especially when we look at the third quarter. So thinking about it, for athletes, if you're getting ready before a big game, what's something that you're going to do to pump yourself up, to get motivated, to get hyped? You're going to listen to music, right? I mean, we see that all the time with these players walking in with their headphones. In baseball, they even have their walk-up songs. We understand the power of music to shift momentum, to shift our mood and our gameplay. And something that you might know from last year. So I talked about this in last year's Super Bowl video, that looking at the match on Christmas last year between the Baltimore Ravens and the Houston Texans, this was at Texas, and they had the Beyonce Bowl. Now, we would expect that probably that would have caused Houston to play better. I mean, as we know, Beyonce is from Houston, Texas, baby. However, what I also talked about is the fact that Lamar Jackson, the quarterback for the Ravens, was very vocal about his excitement to go see Beyonce and maybe even sneak out during halftime to see her, right? And we think about him in comparison to CJ Stroud. Do we think that CJ Stroud is playing Beyonce on the aux? Probably not. And so I think that it was that excitement from the quarterback that actually caused the Ravens to have their strongest quarter in the third quarter. Yes, they won this game decisively, but as we see, they scored the most points in the third. Now, I think some people will kind of erroneously or maybe put too much weight in the fact that at halftime, the coach is giving like a pep talk or the other players are giving a pep talk and they're adjusting strategy. Maybe they're watching some film quickly, etc. I think there might be too much weight put into that and not enough in terms of these big halftime shows and the swing with music. And so thinking about that today, as we know, this is the Benito Bowl, right? So Mr. Bad Bunny, Senor Bunny, is going to get up there and just sing his heart out and entertain the heck out of us. I mean, we are truly blessed. We had Kendrick Lamar last year, Bad Bunny this year. Chef's kiss. And so between these mascots, we want to think which one of these would really benefit more, which one of these would really enjoy the show and maybe it would cause a boost in their performance. And so we'll start with Seattle Seahawks and Blitz. Now, when we think of Seattle, their music taste is probably as far as you can get from Bad Bunny, right? Like it's pretty off. If we think about a more recent kind of modern day artist that has been kind of influential coming from Seattle, the closest that we get to Bad Bunny would be Macklemore. That's right. I said the closest to Bad Bunny that we're getting is Macklemore. And what I want to say is because a lot, just right off the bat, you might think, well, there's probably not going to be a Macklemore to Bad Bunny pipeline. Like if you're listening to one, you're probably not listening to the other, but not so fast. So if you listen to Macklemore, you probably just like to have fun. You like to have a good time. You're here for a good time, not a long time, right? And so you like to pop and lock and jam and break. Maybe you like to swivel those shoulders a little bit. And one thing we know for sure too is that you do not care about the lyrics to songs, right? It's not like you're listening to, say, we were talking about Kendrick Lamar. You don't care if the song is deep and meaningful and influential. And I think those factors right there actually lends itself well to being a fan of Bad Bunny. I mean, if you like to dance and shake those shoulders, swivel those hips, what better than Latin music, right? We're going to be getting a lot of that. And if you don't care that much about the lyrics, perfect, because you can listen to a song where they're singing in Spanish, you don't understand a word, and you're just having fun, you're just enjoying the vibe. So in that regard, I think that if Blitz could, that he would be up there dancing and singing his heart out to Titi Me Preguntan in the casita, right? He would be amongst the fellow VIP, un VIP. Hey, Blitz is going to enjoy this show like a lot of us are. But let's talk about Pat Patriot first before we kind of decide who the music, who the halftime show is going to most benefit. So think about Pat Patriot, right? We have a white man who's supposed to be a true American patriot, listening to a guy singing and talking completely in Spanish at a time like this, right? And I'm sure a lot of other Latin Americans, backup dancers or whatever, are probably going to be there as well, listening to all of that happening during Black History Month. Now, I think it's very obvious Pat Patriot is not going to be a fan of this show. And I think if I were to get that petition that was going around for people to not have Bad Bunny perform at the halftime show, I think Pat Patriot's name would be on it. So I think this is going to create a level of rage in him that we have not seen from people who identify as true patriots since one fateful early January day. And so, with this, and thinking about the sport of football, anger is an asset. I mean, you hear all these players saying, yeah, I wanted to rip their head off, and they're building this, even these motivational speeches. It's all angry and rah, testosterone, right? This is something, in terms of anger, that a team and a player would benefit from. And so I think not only is this going to arouse Pat Patriot's anger and help their team do better in the third quarter, I think the whole second half. I mean, like I said, of all these elements and thinking about how American the game of football is, Pat Patriot is going to have to feel like he's, fighting for his homeland, right? Fighting to keep his country American, right? Despite these folks being American. Let's just say that very clearly. Anyway, so this is going to be actually more powerful in the opposite way in terms of the anger fueling Pat Patriot. So for Blitz to really have a chance, I think that he's got to get out, and his team, they have to start early. They got to score points in the first half. That way, this second half surge by Pat Patriot and the New England Patriots won't overwhelm them. So with all those things considered, and with what we know, by all intents and purposes, it seems like the New England Patriots and Pat Patriot should be the winner of this Super Bowl, right? I mean, like I said, Pat Patriot has been to 10 of the team's 11 Super Bowls, and they rarely lose. Like, they've won more than 50% of the ones that they've been to. And so, with that statistic, I mean, Pat Patriot is just used to winning on these big stages. And he did, although, again, I think it was, more of the Seahawks losing, but he did play the Seahawks before and did beat Blitz before. He's gone to more Pro Bowls than Blitz has. I mean, he's just, these bright lights aren't going to scare him. And as we heard with Blitz, that potentially the kind of mascot that Pat Patriot is could be his Achilles heel. So if Blitz isn't aware of this weakness, if he hasn't really thought about this and studied it before the game and worked on it, this could be something that could cause a problem. But a factor that we haven't yet taken into account is the power of love. As I mentioned when I first talked about Blitz, the Seahawks is my mother's favorite NFL team. And our guest analyst throughout this series, my 6-year-old niece Iris, has now become the Seahawks have now also become her favorite team, despite how much her dad, myself, her grandfather have tried to turn her to the side of the Steelers. She is resolute that she is a Seahawks fan. And so, yes, my mom was cheering before when they lost that Super Bowl, cheering her heart out. But now she has the addition of her grandchild to cheer with her. And that love and that enthusiasm, I think the team is going to feel that, right? Like Blitz soars on the back of that support from the team. I mean, the Seahawks Stadium is not considered one of the loudest in the NFL for no reason. These fans love their city and they love their team. And having lived in Boston myself in the New England, well, Cambridge technically, myself for a year, yes, these folks love their team. However, it's more of a pride and an arrogance that's driving that. More of a we're better than you. Maybe not necessarily the true love for the team like we see for the Seahawks. And to quote the great Martin Luther King Jr. during this Black History Month, he said, "I believe that unarmed truth and unconditional love will have the final word in reality." You know what, Dr. King? I do too. And so love can always be quantified. It doesn't always, go with logic. A lot of times it goes way past logic, but it's going to win out at the end of the day. So with that, I am going to have to select mommy's favorite, Blitz and the Seattle Seahawks, to win this Bad Bunny Bowl. Congratulations, Blitz. You are finally going to get your lick back after a decade of probably sitting and thinking over and over again about that horrendous loss to Pat Patriot earlier. I just want to say thank you all so much for joining me on this journey. I don't know if I will be doing this mascot matchup again next year. It's kind of a lot of work. And so if this is my last year, thank you all for how you have followed along this path. And I hope you've learned a lot about these mascots. And I will potentially see you in the future.